there, I'm Laurel. This is my first video I'm doing alone, so a little nervous. I usually do ones with Jimmy Bell and Lori Bell. They're not related, but they're very, very good friends of mine. They say at times like this, friends become family, and we have become family. And a big shout out to Jimmy Bell's YouTube station or channel if you ever want to do that. Or we do have videos on BitChute on the big picture. We have done a few on Rick Farron's show, as well as a couple that we've just done on our own. I'm going to tell you first, I think I'm going to tell you what I have in store for my videos. And this is why today I just want to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me. I'm not going to go into too deep of history, because everybody does that. Everybody talks about their history. And basically, I think being raised in Watchtower, we all basically have some of the same stories, especially if you were born around the same time I was, being told that Armageddon was going to come in 1975, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I had a normal, which was not normal, as we all know. I can say a normal Jehovah's Witness childhood. Going out in service all the time, going and knocking on doors at 4 and 5 years old, all by myself with a tract, because then somebody would open the door and take the tract from a little blonde-haired girl, whereas my parents knew if they'd sit in the car and I'd go up to the door. I didn't mind. At that time, I thought it was fun. And then I got older, and I was 12, 13. I didn't want to run into anybody I knew from school. So I would pick somebody to work with in the hall that was the same as me, felt the same, another teenager. And we would say, oh, we'll take that block over there. And we'd find a mailbox and put our watchtowers in it, and then say we placed them. So going back that far, I can never say that I was a real good Jehovah's Witness. I wasn't. I never believed in fellowshipping. I don't remember a lot of my childhood. A lot of traumatic things. I don't remember a lot. A few things I do remember. I remember when I was about 5 years old, knowing a guy, his name was David, my father had disfellowshipped him. And I, at 5, had a crush on him. He was a good-looking guy. I think him and his wife had gotten divorced or something like that. And I remember sneaking outside after the Kingdom Hall to say hi to him and talk to him, because even at that age, I did not believe that anybody, if you believed in a loving God, I did not believe you should shun anybody. I never believed in shunning. It's a horrible thing. And it's like putting somebody in solitary confinement. And since then, I have counseled a lot of young people that have been suicidal. And that's exactly how they feel. They lose everything. If I wouldn't have had my aunt, who passed away a couple of years ago, rest her soul. I loved her so much. She was like my mom, my sister. But if I wouldn't have had her, I don't know where I would have gone. I don't know what I would have done, because I would have been completely alone. So anyways, I was gonna tell you I'll wait till the end. I was gonna tell you what I'm planning for videos. But in 1968, we moved to another city from what I'd grown up in. And that is when I know my life totally changed. I was 12 years old. And yeah, it makes me old, doesn't it? I hate to think about that. It's funny, every time I look at people that I haven't seen in a long time, I go, oh man, they look old. But I'm sure they think the same of me. But oh well. Age is, I'm not afraid to tell my age. So anyways, so in 1968, we packed up everything. My father sold our house, sold everything we owned, other than our beat up furniture. And we moved to a rat-infested house across the ocean from where I had grown till I was 12. Not a good time to pack somebody up and change their whole life, but we moved there because the need was great. Armageddon was going to come in 1975, and it gave my dad extra responsibility, which he liked it. In those days, if there was a congregation servant in the congregation you were in, there was really no chance of advancing at all, because once they were a congregation servant, they were always a congregation servant. And I think that was my dad's ambition, that he wanted to be a congregation servant. So we moved where he became the congregation servant of, now I don't want to get this wrong, it was somewhere between 100 and 150 publishers, and there was not one servant there. And they were having lots of problems in that Kingdom Hall. The Kingdom Hall, I do believe, was an old Mason lodge. Correct me on that. It was some kind of a church, or it didn't have a steeple like a church though. So just from my memory, I would say that it was probably an old Mason lodge that our Kingdom Hall was at. I made friends. I was quite popular amongst the friends I made. Most of them were like me and not really into being a Jehovah's Witness, didn't agree with everything, but we pretended. I got baptized when I was 14 because basically you were expected to, and did it to please my father. Basically, I thought, well, maybe if I get baptized, he'll like me more, because I don't want to get into it, but he let's just say he did not like teenage girls very much. And my father at that time was the food service overseer at an assembly. So even though I got baptized thinking that I would get some attention from my father, I didn't. He was too busy with his assignment to even come to watch me get baptized. So that was very hurtful for a 14-year-old. I kind of knew where I stood with my father after that. And after that, I became quite rebellious. I'd go out with my friends, and like I say, they were witness friends. I remember a group of them at one time having a party after an assembly, and they had a book burning party, and they all burnt their youth books. Well, I wasn't at that party. I had been invited, and I can't remember why I didn't go, because usually I'd gone to, especially at the beach, usually I would go. But most of those kids got disfellowshipped. One of my cousins was one of them. As far as I know, I don't know how many still came back in or whatever. But anyways, that was the type of crowd that I was with. And mainly, I think it was because I was looking for attention. My father had always said that God punishes those who he loves. That was always his excuse for disfellowshipping. So I thought, well, maybe I'll do things wrong and I'll get caught and I'll find out that God loves me. And that was from a teenager's point of view. But the thing is, people think that it's so easy being an elders or being higher up in the organization. And it is. I mean, I could get away with anything because my father would hide it all, not because I was trying to hide anything, but because he would cover up for everything I did, because if anybody found out what I did, then he would lose his responsibility. So it was never about me, it was about him. I moved out when I was 17, just turned 17, moved out on my own. I couldn't handle being at home anymore. Still remained a witness because I had very good friends. I mean, we were kind of the ones that don't tell, not, so you see somebody do something wrong and we never told. We kind of stuck together, and the mentality of an elder, even going back then, is unbelievable. I just, to this day, I remember I lived with two other girls that were friends of mine and kind of were the same as me. And we were just excited, three of us living in a one-bedroom apartment, but we got away from all the bullshit. That's all I can say. And so I asked my dad one time to come and see our apartment. Come down and see my apartment, Dad. I was quite excited about it. And his answer to that was, what did he say? Don't want to get this wrong. He said, "Oh no, I could never do that. What would people think if they saw me going into the apartment of three single girls?" And I couldn't believe that. I thought, what father would even think something like that when it's their own daughter? So I kind of learned where I stood. By the time I was 18, I got married to somebody that was from City 800. I'd met him at an assembly. Now I'll tell you the difference. My whole family, my father had eight kids in his family. My mother had 7. All of them were very high up in the organization. My elders, Bethelites, circuit overseers, missionaries, special pioneers, you name it. My father was, after being an elder for years, he went to Bethel and overseered something there for quite a few years. And then when he was finished there, he became an overseer that looked after an assembly hall until he was too old to do that. And then they put him on special pioneer duty, which gave him an income because he didn't have anything to live off of after serving for so long. But I also have uncles that were circuit overseers. I have uncles that were missionaries. I have an uncle that was city servant. Pioneers, you name it. So I definitely have been the black sheep of the family. Most of my cousins have been very good Jehovah's Witnesses, as far as I know. Now, the husband, when I married my husband, he's a little older than me. He's 6 years older than me. At that, I was only 18. But that's how it happens in Watchtower, right? And he was more rank and file. He was at the bottom of the totem pole. He was trying to move up, but he never, ever wanted to be an elder or a ministerial servant. That just was not him. He didn't like giving talks. He didn't like going in service. But he totally believed everything. He believed it all, but he did not want to he just didn't like what was involved with that. He didn't want to ever have to sit on a committee to disfellowship someone because he didn't believe in that either. So after we were married, being newlyweds, we want to, like, for instance, a Saturday, we missed service, and so we wouldn't go in service on Saturday because we're newlyweds. That's his day off. And then Sundays, of course, you have to get up and go to the meeting. So anytime we would miss Saturday service, we would have 2 elders knocking at our door, and it didn't matter when, and they would give my husband the speech. They'd give him, well, if you want to move up, if you want to be like your father-in-law and you want to move up, you got to get your hours up. You got to get out in the service, blah, 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 blah. And on and on. And that we did that for about a year, and I couldn't take that any longer. And I said to my husband, and by then I was pregnant, so we moved across the river to the place that I had grown up. before my father had gone to serve for the 1975 thing, and moved across the river. We were quite happy there, but still, my family wouldn't leave me alone. It was always trying to get my husband to do more than he wanted to do, and I didn't want to do it myself either. I'll tell you one thing. I didn't even know anything about the rank and file. I didn't know there was a class system. My father, with growing up, my mom and dad, we never had anybody to our house for dinner unless they were at least an elder or a ministerial servant or higher. And if they got an invite for dinner, it had to be somebody high up. They never went to anybody that was rank and file's house. It just didn't happen in those days. Unless it was somebody that I think they did go if it was somebody they were studying with. But other than that, unless it was a study, it just didn't happen. So other than my friends, and most of my friends were the same as me, their parents were elders and higher ups. So other than my friends, I really didn't know what it was like down at the bottom of that pyramid. So finally, we had a little baby, and she was 6 months old. And I said to my husband, I said, I can't take this anymore. As much as I loved the city, I loved the ocean, I loved where I grew up, I said, I can't take this. I says, we have to move to where you're from. And not only that, at that time, it was really bad where I was from for work. And he was out of work at that time, and he could get work back in his hometown. So we packed up and moved to his hometown. Well, that's when I found out the class distinction. Then I found out what it's like to be rank and file as opposed to being higher up the pyramid and getting all the privileges that I had gotten. I went there as a 20-year-old girl. I guess I had such low self-esteem from what I'd gone through that I never really did think much of myself. But when I look back now, I guess I was a young, pretty girl, and I got nothing but jealousy, gossip. I don't even think I ever made a true friend for years and years, and it was hard. I'd have people gossip about me, and then say that I said things, and things I hadn't said. I don't gossip, and I don't believe in it, and it was a horrible time. My husband for work had to travel quite a bit, and we had no money, and I had 2 babies by that time, and we only had 1 car. Where we were living, the winters would be down -30, and I had no family, no computers to sit and have a talk like we're doing now. I remember my phone bills to my aunt would be 26 cents a minute, and sometimes we would talk for an hour. That was all I had. I just didn't have a network of people to help me because it was before the computer age. I got through it. I went through some depression. Sorry about that noise out there. I don't know what blew over. We got a little bit of wind. Went through some depression, but I got over it. Everything was fine. Just got busy raising kids. I had 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son. By the time my oldest daughter was 15, my husband and I had never ever gone on a holiday together. And by that time, my sister, I'll throw in there that just before my sister turned 15, my parents sent her to live with us. So as we had 2 little kids of our own, I was raising a teenager at the same time. So I don't like to put blame places, but I do now. As I'm older, I see how my kids suffered as children because I was so concerned about a 14-year-old, 15-year-old teenager. So anyways, our family became bigger. We had my sister stay with us. And by that time, she was a little bit older. She had gotten married by that time. My oldest daughter was 15. And my sister by that time had gotten married. Of course, she got married young too, not as young as me. But so we decided that we were going to take a vacation together, my husband and I. And we left our kids in charge, my sister and brother-in-law in charge of our kids. While we were gone, my daughter started hanging out with a group over in my sister's congregation. I knew the group. There was a boy that kind of hung out with them, and like all pedophiles, they all look younger and act younger. So I didn't know his age. I just knew he was part of the group that they hung out with. Long story short, I guess he started grooming my daughter. At that time, we had no idea. He had money. He drove an expensive convertible Mustang and started, at the time she was 15, going to her school and picking her up in his car and taking her out and skipping out of school and a few times a week, I guess. And from what I know now, I did not know at the time, but by the time she was 16, as far as I'm concerned, no sexual contact between a 26-year-old man and a 16-year-old girl is consensual. That is pedophilia. And she didn't tell us at the time, but he did molest, well, worse than molesting her when she was only 16. Long story short, I'm not going to get into all the basics, but she ended up marrying him, her abuser. Right away got pregnant, had a little boy who we love dearly, but he's gone his father's way and he doesn't speak to me either. But by the time he was 2 years old, I could already tell my daughter was in bad shape. Typical narcissist. He didn't want me or my husband around at all. He kept her at a different part of the city. He very isolated her from friends, family, whatever. He tried to make up stories to the elders about Emil and my husband and I. And we just kind of went along with it. Well, I went along with it because my husband still believed everything. And I just thought, I thought I was a bad person, really. I thought I was really bad. I thought something's wrong with me, that I can't get any of this. I don't believe it, so there's something wrong with me. So I let my husband take the wheel. I let him do everything about taking the kids to the meetings, and I got eventually so that I couldn't even go to the meetings. I'd have panic attacks every time I went, so I quit. When I quit, my father had an absolute breakdown, I think. told my husband that if I didn't want to go to the meeting, he better darn well drag me there, because no was not good enough. He had to drag me to the meetings. And then he tried to tell my husband that he had absolutely no backbone because he wouldn't put his foot down with me. So my husband couldn't take that. But so he quit going to the meetings as well. But even though he quit going to the meetings, he stayed in touch with the brothers, and he stayed in touch with the organization because he was hoping I would go back, and he still believed it. Then one day I was at work I got a phone call from my daughter, bawling her eyes out and said, "Mom, you have to come and get me right away." So long story short, she was going through every sort of abuse imaginable from this supposed witness. And she had locked herself in a bedroom for 2 days, breastfeeding her baby, hadn't had food. She locked her, put a couch chair in front of the door so he couldn't get at her. And I guess when he finally went to work, she phoned and says, "You have to come get me." So I went and got her and took her to our place with my grandson. And he's a bully, a narcissist. They're all the same. He had an absolute fit. It's all our fault. Blamed everything. Oh, it's your mother. Because I grew up with a bully. I knew how to handle them. And he blamed everything on me. Nothing was her fault. It was my fault. And then the elders called and they wanted a meeting they wanted her to come back to her congregation and have a meeting with the elders and with him. But she was afraid and she asked my husband to go with her. So he went. And because my husband still respected the elders and still respected the organization enough, he believed that the elders had power over him still. So first thing when he went in, even though she had said she didn't want to be alone, the elders said, "You can't be here. This is none of your business. This is between a husband and a wife." And they kicked him out. They told him to leave. He had to go sit out in his car. Well, of course, that didn't sit well with me because I would never have left her, but my husband understands that now. That it's the brainwashing. That's what I'm saying. I'm no blame on anybody. It's brainwashing. You have to understand that. So, long story short, we had a huge. It was a horrible divorce between the two of them. He stalked us. We ended up. Every time she would just about have, it went on for about 6 years, because every time we went broke trying to, every time she would have everything with the lawyers done, he would fire his lawyer and she'd have to start all over again. He was taught this. Apparently there's a Jehovah's Witness manual on child custody and how to make sure you get custody. Makes me angry, very angry, that this was my father's granddaughter, and he knew about this book and he never said anything to us. Most he ever did to help was, at that time, he was in Bethel. And I told him what was happening and what was happening to his granddaughter. And he says, "Well, there's nothing I can do to help you. But if you want to write a letter and use my name, you can put my name in it." And I thought, no way. I refused to do that. I was not going to do something that I knew other people couldn't do. Like a normal JW could not use somebody's name to get themselves out of a mess, and I wasn't going to do it. So it ended up that they finally did get divorced. He got half custody of my grandson, and he never raised him. He married another young bride, and she did most of the raising. So my grandson is the only one of my grandchildren that is still a witness. I love him to pieces, and I'm hoping that one day he understands and he wakes up. And I think we're pretty close to that time. Anyways, after the court case, I became very, very vocal. There's that saying that I can't even think of it right now, but women in history, anybody that stays quiet, you never hear about it. It's the loud ones that are remembered. And I didn't care anymore. I told every witness that I knew. I told everybody I knew about what was going on and I didn't go into details, of course, but I told them what a horrible person he was and what he had basically done to my daughter, and trying to get the word out that people like that are still in the organization. And as soon as I start doing that, then he goes to the elders, and that's when he confessed. He confessed to the elders that he had, and this is the first I heard about it, that he had relations with my daughter when she was 16. Well, she ended up getting disfellowshipped. He never got disfellowshipped. Of course, that's the way it works, right? Anyways, life goes on, and my daughter is doing very well now. It's been years. The court case took a lot out of us, and since the court case, I've been shunned by my family. They'll talk to him. Of course they'll talk to him. I believe he's either a ministerial servant or an elder now. So they run into him and they'll talk to him. But yet my daughter, who was the one that was abused, is not talked to by anybody in our family. And I never got disfellowshipped, but I was soft shunned. I don't know if anybody knows what that means. I knew they talked behind my back, and I'd be invited to the odd family get together, but they'd be really careful what they said around me, and it was different. It was never the same after that. And so then when my son he got married and left home, that's why I say I had always raised kids, and all of a sudden my house was empty, had no kids left. I had lots of time to think, and I didn't believe in God at all anymore. I can't say I was atheist because I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know who God was. I just didn't know what to believe. I call myself, I guess I was agnostic. And I started abusing alcohol and sleeping pills. I was, for a few years, you could call me, I didn't care if I lived or died. I felt like I'd lost everything. My husband was never around because I think basically he still believed things, and he didn't like the way that I thought and the way I lived. Our marriage was not good. Until about the year 2014 is when I think my husband finally started. Oh, I was going to say, I didn't tell you. After the divorce, we ended up doing pressing charges. Actually, we didn't press charges. We just took our things into the police station, and they pressed charges against my daughter's ex, and ended up being a 3-day trial plus all the weeks of discovery. And of course, he lied through everything, and of course, it was like every other trial. He had all the JWs on his side, and we're sitting with our daughter. And ended up that the judge, how did he put it? He ruled that we had waited too long with the evidence, because this had already been going on about 4 or 5 years. And we really didn't have enough evidence anymore saying what he'd done to her. She didn't have the bruises. She didn't have the other things. So he had said that even though he believed everything she said, he could not press charges. So it ended up being kind of thrown out. Well, the prosecutor was so upset about the verdict that she ended up, that she said that was her last day ever of being a lawyer. She says, I could have shown so much more evidence. She says it wasn't needed. She says we proved it. And so I know, knowing what I know now about government, I've done lots of deep dives. I've looked into a lot of things. I truly believe that that judge had been paid off by Watchtower. I can't prove it. And so, but my own gut feeling, and I'm pretty good with that, tells me that, yeah, it was Watchtower had really been watching our case because it had been going on for a long time. And like I say, I was very vocal about it. So years go by, and 2014, my husband got really, really sick and ended up in intensive care for 6 weeks. And we were told that his kidneys wouldn't be able to stand another cold winter, so we'd have to go somewhere hot for the winter time. So that's how we ended up down in Mexico. And eventually, so in 2015, we ended up moving to Mexico, and part-time. And then in 2017, we moved for sure full-time, and we're here all the time. But in the meantime, one of my daughters had started going back to meetings and had told me, Mom, things have really, really changed. And they're loving now. She said, I can't believe it, how loving they are. Well, we know that's just, she just got love bombed, right? So I thought, well, maybe things have changed. And she gave me some pamphlet on come back to Jehovah or something like that. And I read it and I thought, wow, this doesn't sound right, but I'll try it out. So I tried saying a prayer, and I cried my eyes out and I said a prayer, and probably for about 4 hours. And I know it had to have been some kind of divine intervention, because the next day, I never watched TV in the daytime. The next day, I turned on the TV right at the exact time that the Royal Australian Commission was on, and they mentioned Jeffrey Jackson's name, and I had known from my daughter that he was a governing body member. And I called my husband. He was in the kitchen. I says, come here. There's going to be one of the top guys from JW on TV. So we sat down in the afternoon and we ended up watching live the Royal Commission, the Royal Australian Commission. So nobody can say that that is BS, because we saw it live on TV. I don't know. I don't know. I never would have put that on, but it happened. And then funny enough, we ended up in 2016 coming down and spending a few months before we moved down here to Mexico. And wouldn't you know that our house right next door to an elder and his wife. So I had told him that I had one time been a witness, told him a little bit. And my husband was really still believing a lot of it. So he invited us to go in, no, it wasn't 2000. Yeah, it was 2016, because the Royal Commission was on the 15th, so it was 2016. They invited us to go to the English-speaking assembly in Mexico. Well, that was the assembly, and I had not been at anything in years, not since the 90s. That's when my daughter had gone through the court case and everything, and I had not had anything to do with it since then. And so everything to me was new. And then they did the drama on 1975. Well, that was it for me. I thought, you effing liars. I could not believe, after everything that had happened in my life around the year 1975, that they would get up there and they would lie about that. And then at the same assembly, they gave the talk on the one that the mother couldn't talk to her disfellowshipped daughter, and not even a phone call. And well, that's the way my parents had always been with disfellowship people anyway, so I was used to that. But just seeing that and seeing that when my daughter was disfellowshipped, what would have happened to her if she didn't have a mom and a dad to come to, I was fuming. I was just fuming that they would teach something like that, because I don't know what would have happened to two of my daughters have been disfellowshipped. I don't know what they would have done if they wouldn't have had me and my husband to come to. They would have had nobody. So I got up and walked out on that one. I couldn't take it. So came home from the assembly. That's when, up until then, I had never done any research, which I should have done. But I think in the back of my mind, I always thought that if I just don't research and don't look at any apostate stuff, then if Armageddon comes, I still haven't done the unforgivable sin. I might still have a good heart, and I might still be able to be it. I might survive Armageddon. But that was it for me. Then after that assembly, I started researching, and I found absolutely everything I could on 1975 and proved that it was true. I found Watchtowers, I found Kingdom Ministries, I found books, I found everything on it. And I showed it all to my husband. So then he started researching with me. Right away, our marriage got so much better. And I researched and researched and researched, and hours a day. I couldn't get enough. So many that I could thank for it. I watched Kim and Mikey. I watched Mark and Cora. There were so many at that time that aren't on anymore. And I thank them so much that they had the nerve to do what they did, because when I watched them and listened to their stories and saw that they were loving people and not at all what, we had all been taught that apostates were. And they were not telling lies. They were using the Watchtower's own literature. Then that's when I decided I'm going to do this too. I'm going to speak out, because if nobody ever would have spoke out, Watchtower would still be where it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But it's so comforting now to see that so many people are leaving. You can see that you'll find out in my next videos what I believe is happening with Watchtower. And you can see that they are not God's organization. We know they're part of the Illuminati. We know that they do not worship the God of the Bible at all. So my future videos that I plan to do, this has just been a hello to let you know a little bit of my story. And like I say, I wanted to keep this under an hour. I didn't want to go too long. My future videos, I have a few things planned that I've done research on. And so far, this is what I've got in mind. I'm going to do one on why Jehovah's Witnesses were banned in Russia and who else was banned at the same time, and what other things happened around those dates. Then I'm going to do one on the selling of Brooklyn Bethel and the tunnels underneath the Brooklyn Bethel, and show you things I've collected and things that I've researched on tunnels that run underneath every city in the world. So children can be snatched and trafficked so easy. They can disappear from a street in 2 minutes, because there's always someplace where there's a tunnel system that they can take them down. And it's going to be so hard to believe, but I've got the proof. I've got the pictures. I've got things that I can show you. Why were Jehovah's Witnesses so sure that 1975 was going to bring on Armageddon. Well, I hope to prove that. And kind of goes along with that same thing is we all know that Watchtower's first name was Zion's Watchtower. We know Zionists are the ones that they're fake Jews. They're not real Jews. They go by the Talmud. They don't go by the Torah. The Torah teaches love. The Talmud basically teaches what Jehovah's Witnesses teach, that they will be the only, everybody else needs to die, and they will be the only ones living. So I'm going to go into the similarities between Jehovah's Witnesses and Zionists. And then I'm going to do one that is more circumstantial, but if you have enough evidence, I believe that nothing is circumstance. So I've got a lot of questions on, because of my upbringing and because of a couple of my uncles being missionaries, I have a lot of questions on whether they were CIA and whether Jehovah's Witnesses actually have sent missionaries and circuit overseers as CIA and trained them as CIA agents. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing with you. Whether I do them alone, I may get some help from my buddies there with them, but either way, this is the first one that I've done alone, and I look forward to speaking with you more. And I'll sign off now. Thank you very much for watching.